Hello. So in this video, we are going to get our enemies to start moving and then handle the collision between the enemy and the player. All right, so we already have one enemy right now. So what I'm going to do is use the action function to constantly make the enemies move. And there are a few different ways to do this, but we'll end up using the action function a lot. So this will be a good one to use. So I'm just going to go into kind of some empty space here and then call the action function. All right, and what that lets me do is look at certain objects, so like enemies or platforms or whatever, and then do something with them. So I could take everything that is an enemy. It's a grab things that are of the tag enemy, and then comma to put a function in to handle what happens with them. So I'm going to make an arrow function, parens equals greater than curly braces. So this little snippet right here, that's the essence of an arrow function. So it's like a function, just a little bit more condensed. So I'm going to expand those curly braces so I can define what happens. Now, what I want to happen is for a thing to move, but then I got to say, well, what's the thing that's moving? So that's exactly what goes inside of the parentheses here. All right, the parentheses, it's a function. You know, they capture the thing that is being modified. So I'm just going to call this E, standing for enemy. All right, so it's going to take that enemy and then do something with it. What's going to say E dot move, make the enemy move. And here is where I actually pass in two different numbers. So let's just pass in 1 and 1 just to kind of see what that looks like. All right, so I'll try that here. All right, so it's not really looking like a whole lot, but maybe because 1's just too small. So try something like 100. All right, and they might be... Yeah, that's a little hard to see exactly. What is occurring here is because it's moving it downward. And this does have physics and everything. So we could try making maybe some of these negative and seeing if that fixes this. All right, so now we're kind of getting this thing to move a little bit more. Yeah, so let's think about what actual numbers do we want here. So we're passing in the X and the Y movement that it's going to do. So do we want it to move in the X direction? Do we want it to move in the Y direction? I just want to get these enemies to like chase toward the beginning of the scene. So I definitely want something with the X. With the Y, I don't want anything to happen. And that's what was getting in the way. For the X movement, I do want it to move to the left. So I'm going to reduce its X every time. All right, so let's see what that looks like. Yep, okay, so now those enemies just keep moving. And it has a body and everything, so it kind of falls down the platform, which is kind of a neat thing to see. What was getting in the way before is that I was applying a Y movement, so it was pushing it downward, and it was getting stuck on the platform because it was trying to move into it, but that caused some friction. So those body things really do calculate actual physics here. So now I'm just getting some really simple movement. Just move over to the left. It isn't trying to push against it, so it doesn't get stuck. So this moves it to the left, basically. I'm kind of curious if I tried to use the constant left that has a vector that works like that. No, it doesn't. All right, so just go back. So passing in what the actual component is. So the enemy moves. We use the action function to do something every time. That's what action does. For every one of those enemies, it took each one and made it move. And this would work if we had multiple enemies. So now we want to see if there's a collision between the enemy and the player. So I'm going to add that function. I'm going to use the collides function. It's going to be something that the player does. So I'm going to say player dot collides, which is a function. And it's, we're starting to see a pattern. It looks a lot like these here. So I'm going to specify the tag. Okay, so when the player collides with an enemy, comma, then what do I do? All right, so parens, arrow, curly braces. So then I'm going to do this function here. All right, one thing that could kind of make sense is do an add kaboom. Every time the player collides with anything of the tag enemy, then add a kaboom. We have to specify the position here, so maybe with the player. So take player dot pause. So it's pause component there. All right, yep. All right, so they're still colliding. They're constantly colliding like that. So we'd want to think about how else to handle that situation. But we are definitely getting the kaboom to happen. All right. What we could do is to destroy the player. So we could take player dot destroy. It the other way. It's actually just use the destroy method, destroy function, destroy player. Destroy something. What are we destroying? The player. Yeah, there we go. All right. So the enemy just keeps moving on its merry way because it's destroyed the player. So I obviously can't jump or continue in the game. So that's kind of given us a lose scenario.